Hello, really nice to be here. Sorry not to be able to be in person with you. I have some travel restrictions due to the last few weeks of my pregnancy. But I'm really happy to be participating to B2B Rocks. This has been an event we've been supporting with French Tech for quite a while now. And even more happy to welcome Eleonore Crespo from Pigment to join me on stage for this session. This is a topic that I know is very close to both of us. I'll let Eleonore maybe present herself before we deep dive in the topic.
Yeah, hi everyone. Very happy to be on stage today, even remotely, and thank you so much, Clara, for the invitation. It's indeed a topic that is more than key, I think, for the French tech ecosystem, and I believe that Clara and her team have done a fantastic job in the past year to put in place some incredible initiatives that I think will be game changer, and that I think are the beginning actually of a broader parity initiative that we should all support and be part of. So thank you for the invite.
Perfect. Just to make sure everyone has in mind what we do at French Tech before we start. So the mission French Tech, our mission is to really help the startup ecosystem develop in France and beyond. We have more than 20,000 startups in France now, as you might all know. But one of the main things that is challenging for the startups is really the topic of talent, because the ecosystem has now grown so much. There's a lot that has been put together to support the ecosystem, to build this next generation of companies who are more ambitious than ever. And the topic of talent always comes back when I can talk with all the founders of the startups we support, especially the founders of the Next 40 and French Tech 120, which Eleonore is one example of. Talent is very important because this is what fuels the growth of those companies, but talent is becoming more and more scarce in a world where all those companies are now raising money and having ambitious expansion plans to develop their companies. And this is a bit how the topic of parity came to us and how we decided to really go for it. It's not just a topic of society. It's not just a topic of making sure this French tech ecosystem, which is now employing more than 1 million persons in France, is equal and allows for opportunities for both men and women, which today doesn't really do. We have more than 70% of the people working in French tech startups that are men. So out of this 1 million people, it's 700,000 men, which is unfortunate because this is not what we want for society. We want to make sure that this dynamism we see in the startups is helping everyone to find professional opportunity, professional development. But beyond being a societal topic, it's also a performance topic. Because when we think about talent being one of the main source of tension for companies to grow, if we can make sure that we address 100% of the population and we embark this 100% of the population and not just half, not the male part of the population, into the French tech journey, we're pretty sure that we can help companies grow faster. So that was something that we discussed a lot with the founders of Next 40 and French Tech 120 when the new promotion was announced in February 22, with numbers that were all around the press and that were quite depressing. Zero female who were CEOs of Next 40 companies, startup 40. And when you open it to the French Tech 120, we had only 7 CEOs who were female. Eleonore being one of them. And so the press was quite right to point that in 2022, these are the most advanced companies, the one building innovation. How come they are not more diverse? And how come women are not taking leadership positions in those companies? So what we did is we gathered a bunch of entrepreneurs from those French Tech 120 Next 40 companies around the different workshops. We had a few workshops where we had CEOs, but also CTOs, CMOs, everyone in the executive teams of those companies come together to discuss this topic and to really think concretely, what can we do to change this? what is being done today in all those companies that could be a best practice for others. What is being done that has worked, what is being done that maybe hasn't worked, and how can we make sure that we can collectively commit to change the way we address this topic in the companies, and commit to some very, very concrete steps that we'll come back on with Eleonore, so that we can make a real difference and make sure that the French tech ecosystem of tomorrow is much more equal when it comes to giving opportunities to men and women than it is today. Maybe I'll let Eleonore share a bit about those workshops and most importantly, why is it a topic that is important for her at Pigment before we come back on the 5 commitments we took together.
Sure. Yeah. So it's thank you very much, Clara. I think once again that it's a wonderful initiative, and I really wish we could be a half female founder in the FT 120, and that obviously we hopefully in the next couple of years we will represent the next 40 in a much better way. So it's a topic that we discuss pretty much every day at Pigment, how to be more diverse. We are a B2B SaaS software based out of Paris, London, and New York, and so we are a global company. And I must say that it's not a topic that is restrained to France, right? It's a topic of the leading company of tomorrow globally. And it's interesting to see that actually France is taking very strong position there, because I can tell you that it's not even the case in other countries, right? So, and the same problem is coming everywhere, right? Like you don't see much more female founders or much more female exec in the US or in the UK or in Germany, right? So it's a problem across the globe, and I'm very happy to start the initiative by, the countries that where we are headquartered, basically, and with very strong commitment on some, exec decisions that we should take differently and strategic decisions that we should think differently. So I loved the way we carried the workshop with the French Tech 120, because we started with the law and with the constraint of the law. So there is this law in France called Loi Rixin, and we had the opportunity and the honor to discuss with the deputy that actually obviously wrote this law and explain to us obviously what was difficult to implement within that law, and what was kind of the shortcomings that she would have liked to see actually in that specific law. And we obviously spent time wondering what was actually feasible, I would say, within the broad scope of companies that represent the French Tech 120. Just to make sure everyone understands the problematic, we have companies that are at a very, very large spectrum, in a very large spectrum. So we have companies that are B2C that have, many factories in France and globally. We have companies that are like us, enterprise B2B, very focused, on software. We have companies that are dealing with infra. We have medias. So companies in the fashion ecosystem as well, etc. So everyone has very different constraints and also very different problematic around diversity in general. It's not only about parity, but diversity. And I'm actually very satisfied to see that we managed to actually agree on a couple of strong initiatives, because that was not easy, given the fact that we all have very, very strong constraints. So one thing that was very, I think, important to us and very close to my heart was to make sure that we could foster an ecosystem where more role models could emerge. Because I think what's also lacking today is a number of role models that can pave the way for, more obviously women or diverse people to actually obviously start creating companies, funding companies, have a very large ambition. Because as Clara mentioned, I do believe that the French Tech 120 are actually the companies that are the leaders of tomorrow's world, right? So we are the companies that are probably going to be, some of them, part of the CAC 40. Some companies are obviously going to be emblematic globally, not only in France again. So we have to make sure that we show that obviously from a social standpoint, we do things that are more innovative. And that's obviously the first initiative we have to do if we want to play in that category.
And I think that was something that was really important when we gathered the founders of the French Tech 120 and Next 40. They were not at all in the mindset that you saw depicted by the media, like, oh, this is like an ecosystem with only men who really don't care about this topic. They were all convinced that if they don't do it in a way that is exemplary, how can they be this next 40? Because there is this idea that next 40, French Tech 120 are the next CAC 40, SBF 120, which is the most advanced listed company in France. But being the next ones also mean doing things the right way. And this is something that was really close to the heart of the entrepreneurs. So what we did after we put all this collective work together, it was really great for me to see how the CEOs or CMOs or chief people officer all interacted, bringing their own vision. Sometimes they really agreed on the topic, being critical. Sometimes they didn't. There was a really like collective safe space where they could say, okay, like I understand this idea of having much more equal maternity and second parent leave is so important, but how do I do concretely in my companies to make it possible, to make sure that people who are going on leave come back and they know how to go back to work in an efficient way, to make sure that we're prepared as a company to do all those changes. And what came out of those workshops is a list of, I would say, like tips and collective commitments that we could take to really change the way that this topic is implemented in companies. The 5 commitments that we landed on collectively and that we really wanted to make sure we started with, because this is only the start of the work, not the finish line. And that were signed and committed to by more than almost 70 companies of the French Tech 120, so more than half of the companies, are trying to tackle the topic in all the dimension it happens. So this is exactly what Eleonore was saying, like, this is not a topic you can solve with just one magic commitment. You have to make sure that you create the environment that is going to bring more of the female talents to the tech world everywhere in the chain, in the value chain. So that's why the 5 commitments are really trying to solve the problem in multiple different dimensions. First, with the commitment to have quotas to make sure that we reach 20% of women in the boards in 3 years and 40% in 5 years. This is kind of this is exactly the commitment that big public listed companies had to take because of the law Copé-Zimmermann in France. And we know it works because this law was passed in 2011, and today France is the #1 country that has the most percentage of women on the board, 45%. So the entrepreneurs of French Tech 120 and Next 40 committed to go in this direction, bring this engagement for themselves, even if they didn't have to do it by the law. And then I think it helped have very concrete discussion on, okay, all my investors are male, what can I do? But maybe you can have independent women board member. And actually, Eleonore volunteered to maybe help those companies being board member for 2-3 of them. So that was one of the engagements that is really important, because if you don't set the example by the top, you can't really make sure the topic is taken seriously in the companies. So that was one, and then there are 4 other engagements. I won't go in details in all of them because it might be a bit too long, but really tackling all the steps. So having the board, which is much more focused on the topic of parity, having making sure that we can, when we create those role models that Eleonore was talking about, so making sure that those companies, when they speak to the media, but also when they speak internally to their people, it's not only the same directors who are all male who are going to talk publicly about the companies, because you want to make sure that female can project themselves in this ecosystem. So that was the second engagement, making sure that when you attract more female to join those companies, the recruiting processes are equal, which is something that unfortunately is still not really well implemented. To give you one example, there is this association that did this research today. Out of 500,000 job descriptions that were published online, almost 80% of them were considered being not open to diversity and having some unconscious bias, pushing the job description to one gender versus another. It's small stuff. It's like, oh, I'm looking for develop a new IT developer. Are you the man that is going to make it to help us? Well, maybe this is not going to help a woman to apply, right? So this is the third engagement, making sure that the recruiting processes are much more equal. And then there is a commitment to make sure that all the managers in the company can be trained on this topic, because this is not something you're often conscious about. All the biases you have around this topic of gender equality, and making sure the managers can really understand, like, what are those biases that everyone has? And it's literally everyone. It's just the way we've been developed during our studies, during the time we're with our parents. Like, everyone is affected. So how do we make sure that companies can really help their managers being conscious of this problem? And the last one was around making sure that the parents who are going through parenting in those tech environments, which can be really fast and where a lot can change in just a few months, are welcomed back in a way that is really thought through, where everything is put in place so that when women or men come back from their parenting leave, they can continue their careers, they can continue projecting themselves in the company, and they're supported, which is something that also came as very important. I don't know if maybe Eleonore, you want to talk about one of those commitments that would be most important for you. And I'm seeing the time is running out. Also, maybe just what would be your advice to one of the 7 CEOs who's a female in the French Tech 120. Beyond those commitments, do you have any advice for people who would like to start a company, and for all those women that maybe don't start today?
Sure. So two things. So maybe, one commitment that, again, I think is probably one of the most dramatic in France is maternity leave. And I still do not understand why we don't have equality on that topic. And that has to come from the law. It shouldn't come from French tech. So I'm a strong supporter of, having a way to split paternity and maternity. And that's an engagement that's close to my heart. And I think, it's great that already we'll all provide some fantastic support, and we are all trying also to make effort to make equality within the French tech ecosystem already. And that goes with the role model, okay? So it's really linked, because the role models, as you can imagine, they are all in their probably 30s, 40s, and obviously it's time when you have kids in young age, or when you are attending a child, etc. So making that way simple, I'm sure, could go a long way, and Clara knows that very well. And, as an advice for young leaders, I mean, there is nothing that should restrain your ambition. And I think, obviously nothing around maternity, as I mentioned, but more generally, I'm always very happy to help young females that would like to launch their own companies. You can, by the way, never hesitate to ping me on LinkedIn. I'm always very responsive when it comes to coaching, because at the end of the day, creating your own company, we are in a country where we are lucky enough to have a lot of fantastic, we have BPI and a lot of fantastic angels, and a very good VC ecosystem, and so many initiatives that have been put in place by the former president and President Macron, and there are so many initiatives, obviously, that has been put in place by French tech to allow you to start a company with almost no constraints. Like, you are not putting yourself at risk. And so I would just encourage people that have the passion and energy to go and get advice and get mentorship to actually understand how they can create a global leader in 2021 in the tech ecosystem, because there is space for you. And as a female leader, you will always get the help you want and need to actually go further. So go. And I can't wait to see parity in the French 120. I think that will be the biggest achievement if we manage that. And thank you, Clara.
Thank you so much. I'm sure this is very helpful for everyone listening to us. Thank you. I don't know if there is a Q&A. I don't think with Visio we can do it. But we're really glad to have been able to have Eleonore joined us because this is always so much more insightful, and people who are actually making this journey can testify. So thank you so much for your time, and really happy to be with you on B2B Rocks today. And same as Eleonore, don't hesitate to reach out by LinkedIn if you have any question or things we could do for you. And if you're leading a company and you want to join the Parity Pact, we're also very glad to welcome you, because that's the idea.
Thank you, Clara. And yes, let's extend that pact to beyond the French Tech 2020. That's the most important, I think.
We already have a bit more than 60 companies that signed since we launched the pact. New companies.
Incredible. Thank you, everyone.